Welcome back to 20 Games in 30 Days. This is day number 5, day number 6, game number 5, Frogger. Along with showing off how I made this game, I also wanted to talk about other things I've been doing over Christmas break. Specifically, these games are now available on itch, and there is a old saying among engineers, why do in 15 minutes what you can spend 3 days automating? The times and dates aren't exactly a part of the saying, but for me, that was the numbers. So I now have a automated deployment pipeline that will allow me to send all of my games up onto itch with a single button press. So if you think that's interesting or could be useful in your projects, then stay tuned. If that doesn't sound interesting and you just want to hear how I made this game, here's a timestamp you can jump to, but I definitely wanted to talk about both. I didn't want to necessarily make an extra video about it, so this is being bundled in, a 2-for-1 special. This is how I made Frogger and how I almost lost my sanity trying to make a deployment pipeline for Frogger and my other games. Thank you for watching. Let's jump right in. So all my previous games exist in a single GitLab repository. I did this for convenience, but the problem with it is I like using some add-on assets, which I have to either copy paste multiple times or have system links or something, and that I don't want to have to do that. So I decided it would make a lot more sense to create a GitLab group. This is something I've never done before, but I figured this is as good a time as any. So I'm going to start by deleting all of my projects and then re-uploading them as their own projects within this group. So I'll start by removing them, and then I will create a game template, and this is going to have all of my GitLab stuff set up, and it will also have a basic game with all the settings the way I like them. So when I start a new project, I just copy paste the game template into a new project, and I can start from there instead of starting from scratch, and I don't have to do all these same settings like game window size, etc. from scratch. Thankfully, I already have a basic template, so we're going to copy this, paste it over here, and double check some of the basic settings. That looks good. I'll just add a little more, make sure that we know it's a template. So here we go, run it, and it says game template. I now want to import 3 submodules that I like to use. We have a console, we have a better print function, and we have a frames per second counter. So now when I run this project, all 3 of them should show up, and we have the game here. You click down and you have a console, and if I type this out, I can now look at my frames per second. So all of these are built in, and I'm going to be using them in all my projects going forwards. And, ooh, okay, that's kind of ugly. Let me fix that real quick. Okay, much better. The last thing I'm going to want to do is import this as a submodule in the launcher itself. So at this point I have an idea. I made a tool a while back called Modular Godot, and basically what it is a mod system that will take Godot's pack files, which is how games are exported, and it'll import them at runtime on the fly. So I have a demo here where I can click over and I can run tic-tac-toe, and then I can run an image viewer. Each of these are saved as their own file on the disk, and these can be swapped out at runtime without restarting the game. So I thought that would be really cool to adapt to make a game launcher for all of my games. So I'm going to try exporting the template as a package file and seeing if it pulls in. And okay, that looks good. So the next thing I'm going to do is try it with Pong. I'm feeling a bit overconfident at this point, so I decided to make a better looking launcher before I do that. That's definitely not going to bite me in the butt later when this whole thing stops working. But yeah, so we have the nice new launcher now, and let's see how Pong looks. And okay, not so good. As you can see, it shows up and it looks fine, but the problem I'm running into is I don't have controls. Because all of these games are exported Apparently, how Godot does this is you have an executable which contains all of the project settings. It contains control mapping, it contains any singleton objects, all of that is in the .exe file for the game. And then everything that loads up at runtime, so the scenes, those are contained in the package file. So when I'm loading the package file for this game, I'm missing all of that information about how the game works. So I didn't realize this until much too late. I spent about a day and a half messing with this thing, and then I realized that that was just not going to work. I think I could have made it work if I had started from the beginning with this in mind. I kind of was thinking about it, but I didn't plan ahead and I didn't think through what it would take to make these work. So I'm going to give up on this idea, which is kind of sad. I was hoping it would work. But instead, what I will do is I will spend another day. So this is going to be 3 days total. But I'll spend another day working on the CI/CD integration, like I talked about, and I'm going to get all of these games to build and load over to itch. So that part will work. I can't play them all together in an HTML web browser, which would have been cool. But what I can do is give a single zip file that can be downloaded, which contains all of the executables for all of my games, and that'll be generated automatically with a single button press. For this part of the project, I'm not exactly starting from scratch. The modular Godot program I showed off earlier was actually a part of a Godot common library that I put together. And I've used this a couple times. I actually recently used it in a game jam before I started the 20 games in 30 days. And this button will deploy the game to itch. And I used that, and it actually saved me time during a game jam. The problem is, all of these builds here, there are way too many options. I do this a lot. I shoot myself in the foot. I make something that's more complex than I will ever need. I have all of these different release beta streams that I can use. And then here is my GitLab CI.yml that I wrote. And this is just tons and tons and tons of jobs, and I don't need all that. So I'm just going to cut this in half, and the final product, I'm going to show it off in a minute, is going to be about half that size, and that's what I'm going to use for my base game template. And that'll be what all these games are built off of, including the one I'm doing today, Frogger, but also my previous games. I have a couple of files here. So first off, this version info file is the only file that I need to change when I copy this into a new project. So this game is SDG Games here, matches the group name, and 20 and 30 can match the game name. So if I create a game called template on itch, I can then one-click push my template project. This is a small change I made that I need to push. So I hit push, and my change goes into the cloud, and automatically we see that there is a pipeline pending. So I click in here and we can watch the pipeline run. And I have 4 jobs now. There's a build release for Linux, build release for Mac, build release for web, and build release for Windows. And then there are 2 extra jobs here. If I show a dependency graph, you can see that the deploy job requires all of these to pass. Consolidate artifacts will take whatever I got and put them all in a single zip file. So how that works as that's running is I have a GitLab CI.yml, and this is a GitLab file. So there are 3 common jobs here, and that's build internal, build release, and build web. For the master branch, I'm going to be using release, and for any working branch, I'm going to use internal. So that's just a little bit of stuff there. And then there are my jobs. Build web is a completely different command. It needs to make a index.html. So this has to be a different command than the other 2. And then our deployment jobs down here will essentially import it will run this job using these settings. So this is just a combination of these things above. And that's it. I have the pack job here will essentially just double check that everything exists and save it as a single file. So I can download all 4 jobs simultaneously. And then here my itch job is, it will use Butler, which is a itch.io tool to push these folders directly into my game. So that is it for my GitLab CI.yml for the template. So once I have that, I'm going to start moving into uncharted waters. I need to now trigger this pipeline from the launcher project. Even though I don't have a game launcher, I still want to be able to download artifacts and run a pipeline that consolidates everything and pushes all of them to itch as a single zip file. I don't know if there's a better way to develop pipelines, but as far as I know, you just keep checking in change after change after change until finally it starts doing what you want it to do. So there is a ton of rework on that, but I finally hit the point where I got it just the way I wanted. One note that I find kind of frustrating, I'm learning to use all these tools, and I love open source. I love GitLab and Godot and some of those things, but something I find immensely frustrating is I'll be going and I'll be looking up, okay, I'm having trouble with my variables in PowerShell. I'm not sure how this variable expansion is working and what I'm doing wrong. Oh, here's a note in some cases. Okay, I think that's what I need. And I click here, and all of a sudden I am looking at a closed pull request, and I have to read through this whole thing to try to figure out what was going on. And that's just the nature of open source software, I suppose. I'm getting way too good at reading random pull requests online. But anyways, here is, first off, we'll look at how it works. This is similar to what I did before on my template. The major difference is the bridge job. Bridge and bridge repack are the two jobs I made. And these took a lot of just messing and trying until I figured out how it works. But the bridge job will trigger branch main on a particular downstream project. And the project here is determined by this variable project. So 20 games in 30 days / game template / Pong / breakout, Space Invaders, etc. And I will simply add each new game. I'll add a bridge job and a repack job for that game, and everything will automatically work for that game. So it will call that job, and then the bridge repack will take the variables from that job using this curl command, and it will load them into the local Docker instance for the bridge repack job, which essentially imports all of the built games from this other repo that it built in to the current repo I'm working in. And from there, I have to unzip that zip file, and then I move everything into the files I want them in, and it's set up just like I like it. So at the end, I can simply push to itch.io-release here, and it will take all of those folders and it'll push them straight up, sorted by operating system. And then you can download a zip file for your OS containing all the games I made in this project. The template seems to be working, so now all I have to do is create 6 more projects based off of it. I tried to use the template feature after a lot of Googling. It turns out that is for premium users only. I'm not using GitLab Premium. However, I can do a simple workaround where you export this as a backup and then you import that backup as a new project. So I will do that 6 times. I'll do Pong on its own, I do Breakout on its own, and after those 2 I feel more confident, so I do the other 4 games all at the same time. So now I have all of these up and running, and they seem to be working pretty well. I am going to kind of jump ahead in time now after Frogger is completed, because I want to show how I push this live. So I have a small change I'm going to push into this project, and then we're going to walk through the build process and sending it live on itch with that one button press I mentioned. We can see these bridge jobs. It says they were successful because they successfully triggered, but here's the downstream pipeline running now. And this is under asteroids, and we are building our release, Mac, web, Windows. We go back to the launcher, and we can watch these things build. So I can see here are all of my downstream projects that are working, and I can expand any one of these. Oh, looks like my repack job's actually finished. This is sometimes a little slow to update. So I can see that it managed to collect all of that stuff. And so my consolidate artifacts job is finishing, but since all these dependencies are satisfied, I can click itch.io-release. So over here, we have 20 games in 30 days, and it contains an earlier version of all of these. So I want to update that. I want to put my latest version on. I actually think this is something that everyone could benefit from. This is a super useful tool, and it's not too complex. When obviously I make it complex when I'm using upstream and downstream jobs, but just the basic running a let's build the job up online and click a button to push it to itch is super simple. You could use what's in my template for any game of your own, and I think it would be a very worthwhile thing to do. That's just my opinion on that, but I'm definitely going to be using this going forward. There we go. We pushed. Job succeeded. And build is now processing. Should be up in a bit. So these are patches because they existed previously. Itch is good about that. So I come here. I'm going to refresh the page. And we have 3 new jobs. Windows, Linux, and Mac 2. That's my CI/CD pipeline. Super happy with the way that turned out. I you can download these games and play them for yourself, and they're up. But I am now going to pivot and actually show off how I made the game itself. So we'll be jumping in. This is more traditional 20 games in 30 days. I just spent 3 days not working on Frogger, so we're going to start with a speed run. We're putting an hour on the clock. And then we are going to start working on Frogger. Definitely not going to finish the game in an hour, but I do want to do a bit of a speed run and see how much I've learned and how quickly I can get up and running. I have worked with tile sets before, so that's why this was so quick for me. I did this all in about 15 minutes, but I have my tile set here that I imported from an old game I worked on. So I've used this particular one before, and I had to modify the water texture in particular. So here we go. And these are using auto tile bit masks, which are a wonderful tool that basically says if I click and drag, it will form a shape and automatically place the tiles as necessary. So here's a more complex one. So you can draw any combination of shapes based on these bit masks. So super useful, super quick, and I just did that to get myself a little bit of a starting point for this Frogger game. Now that's done, I'm going to create a bunch of empty objects in the scene, and then once I got those in place, I'm going to start working on a quick script to move an object from one side of the screen to the other, and then jump back to the beginning. So that should be good enough where we can now have an object moving across the screen slowly, and if that looks good, we can then add multiple objects doing the same thing, and hey, that looks even better. These don't interact with anything, but at least they're here. So with the little time we have left, I'm going to try to get a player moving. And again, I'm not doing any art yet. I'm using the texture pack I found for everything. But I will come back and draw some things. But for now, this is going to be a traffic cone jumping on floating fire hydrants. And now we're down to the wire. I need to finish all of these control mappings before I run out of time. Joy axis. Down. Choking at the last second. Add joy axis. Down. Close. Okay. Whew, that was time. Let's see if I managed to get it all or not. Play. Up. Up, down, left, right. Yep. Okay. We have a game, kind of. Now all I'm going to have to do is fix all these moving sprites. These should be turtles, these should be logs. I should ride these as I move. There's a little more work to do, but I'm happy with what we did in just the first hour, so. Okay, so one thing I wanted to highlight, here's the obstacle script I wrote earlier. This quite straightforward and simple. It just moves and slides. The other one, though, on the player side, uses something I haven't touched before, and that is this tween node. Essentially, this is a combination of a timer and something like a lerp or slurp function. And what I can do is use it to do a sinusoidal movement that eases in and out on the ends. So those two parameters there, along with the speed, essentially allows me to move this frog in a way that kind of feels like a hop. So instead of just sliding, it will accelerate in and then ease out of each hop as it goes. So that's just kind of a fun way, and that's, I guess, how Godot does that. But when I fire up the game and move around, it feels like a frog hopping, even though the art doesn't represent that yet. Of course, there's still quite a few things missing. So first off, we want to be able to detect when we get hit by a car, and we'll splat when that happens. So frog is hopping around, hit by car, no longer there. The next thing we want to add is the ability to ride on these logs. How I'm just going to do that is I'm going to detect when we hop onto it or when we enter its area, and then we will adjust our movement to match the movement of the log below us. Hey, that works pretty well. Oh, that doesn't work though. So we have the movement is working, splatting is working, and we can hop on these logs, but we can't hop off of them yet. So we need to add a function here to drown. I'm just going to check the number of colliders that we are overlapping with, and if it is 0, we will drown. So let's test that out. And it doesn't work because we start at 0 and this function isn't actually being called. You can fix this multiple ways, but I'm just going to throw a collider on the dock here. So this collider's velocity is 0, so we won't be moving when we hop onto it, but it will kickstart this process. And we are checking our Y position, so this only happens on the top part of the screen. Success! Okay, let's add some kill brushes so you can't leave the screen. And then we want those 5 lily pads on top to actually do something when you land on them. And I think that's about it for the game. Let's give it a final test and see how this looks. Cool, I'm happy with that. I think all we need to do next is add some UI. So we're just going to skip ahead the 2 hours it took to edit that. And here we are with UI as well. So we got points from the frogs get home, and when we get all of them, we also get points for that level cleared. So that is a completed game. The next part we need to do is, of course, the art. And this is the one thing, if you remember from Space Invaders, the last game where I drew my own 2D art assets, I never got around to animation. So I'm going to spend a fair bit of time animating the frog, and I'm also going to draw a turtle, and then we're going to replace these. I think these are benches right now, but we're going to replace these with actual logs. And that will be it for the game. It turns out animation isn't too hard, it's just quite iterative. So while I'm working on this, if you've seen my previous videos, I love looking into and learning some of the history of these games as I'm making them. And because I started this video off a little different, I haven't done that yet. There's a fun quote from Softline, which is a magazine back in the day, that said, "Frogger has earned the ominous distinction of being the arcade game with the most ways to die." I think it's kind of funny that in a world full of deliberately violent games that this one had that distinction. So this game was much later than a lot of the other games I've worked on. Even our next game, Pac-Man, came before Frogger. This one got to take advantage of a lot of later hardware, and it was created by Konami. So we're back in Japan. Space Invaders was in Japan. for asteroids, we came back over to the US, but back in Japan with Konami. So it was designed by Akira Hashimoto. He was waiting in traffic one day for a light to turn green, and he saw a frog trying to cross the road and while avoiding vehicles. So he parked the car, carried the frog to the other side, and immediately imagined that this would be a game. So he developed it. It was first published in Japan. It became fairly successful over there, and then Sega picked up the worldwide manufacturing rights. So that story is also kind of funny. Elizabeth Falconer was a market researcher at Sega, and she brought this game to some of the corporate heads, and they rejected it because it was a woman and children's game, as they said. She retorted that they probably were the same people who rejected Pac-Man, which had become wildly successful, and no one was happy with that response, but they decided, fine, we'll let her have it, and she ran a playtest in America, and it was received incredibly well, partially because it was not restricted by age or gender. A lot of people played it who weren't necessarily as interested in the more violent games. It went on to be a top-grossing game in 1981, and with all its ports, it ended up selling over 20 million copies. So quite a successful game in the long run. Okay, that is my frog made and animated. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I think it looks great on that backdrop. This next part, we're going to be drawing a turtle, so it's going to be kind of the same thing. I end up spending a whole bunch of time animating the water coming off of it, just because I want it to look like it's actually kind of making splashes as paddling, so I might skip a bit of that. But here is the turtle swimming upstream. Okay, I'm really happy with that. I decided let's also get the water moving, so I'm just going to move the center section of the water, and then I am going to draw our logs. So these will be floating down the river. They won't all be moving the same speed as the water, but they will all be moving. So I'm drawing them in 4 sections. I've got 2 middles, so there's not a ton of repetition, and then a front end and a back end. And I'm going to grab colors from my palette, try to make them all look the same, and then add a water wake coming off of them as well. A couple other small things I changed. The frog now will turn around when he lands in the lily pad on the top, so that was just another minor detail. And then you may have noticed some thin black lines earlier. I enabled GPU pixel snap, which was able to fix that. And all that simply does is it makes sure that every pixel in the game renders directly to a pixel on screen instead of trying to interpolate between and having black lines between them. And here it is with everything in there. Oh, there's a small issue, no worries. I'm very, very happy with the way this has turned out. So we just need to finish up. I think the only thing left is particle effects when they splat. The original Frogger had a animation for that, but I've done more animation than I've ever done before, and I kind of want to just do a particle effect. So we're going to do the same thing I did in Asteroids. We're going to make a splat when you're hit by the car. We're going to make a splash when you land in the water, and then I'm just going to do some playtesting and double check if there's any small bugs. I might iron them out. But all in all, very happy with the way this game turned out. I love the juicy sound effect. Thank you so much for watching. This has been 20 Games in 30 Days, and I will be back in a couple of weeks with my next game, Pac-Man. This will be the last arcade game I will be making before I jump into the slightly more modern era with some console games. This is game number 6, so if you missed some earlier ones, here's a playlist. And yeah, thank you for watching.